Can you see
Hey,
me?
how are you?
Doing excellent. How are you doing?
I'm okay. It's so lovely to see
You too.
you.
I feel like it's been a while since we chatted
It
in
has
real
been a while.
time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll just turn you down slightly so there's not like an echo or something. Are you wearing
Yeah,
headphones?
yeah, I'm wearing AirPods.
Oh, you're doing the smart thing. So, for everyone who doesn't know you, I know you quite well. So,
Yeah,
like, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Natalie Fulton. I'm most active on YouTube. I started doing street outreach shortly after I went vegan. It was during quarantine I went vegan because I saw Dominion and it was just so horrible what was happening to animals. So I wanted to start doing street outreach, so I started putting it up online. I just started working with Pro Animal Future, and we're running two campaigns in Denver right now. One is to ban the sale of fur, and one is to ban slaughter in Denver. So if we are successful, we'll close down the largest industrial lamb slaughterhouse in the US, which would absolutely be amazing. They kill 1,500 baby lambs per day there. So obviously, we want to get that shut down. And this is just the first step. We want to work toward banning factory farming in 10 states within the next decade. So it's very exciting stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about pro animal future in a bit. But I want
Yeah.
to know for everyone, how long have you been doing activism for?
Totally. So I've been doing activism basically right after I went vegan. So almost, I've been doing activism a bit over 3 years. And I started really small. I started with just printing out popular vegan tweets and putting them up around my neighborhood and making stickers that, talk about how meat causes pandemics and putting those up. And then I started having conversations with my friends and family. And then when those didn't go as well as I wanted, I started talking to people on the streets. But yeah, I felt since I saw just how bad it was for the animals, I really felt called to do something about it. So I started doing activism pretty much right away. And if you're watching and you haven't tried activism yet, I highly encourage you to do it. You can start easy and work up from there.
You've kind of answered this question because I was actually going to ask you, like, was it shortly after you went vegan? But you've already said, like,
Yeah.
you were like, oh, I'm just going to go out there, I'm going to be vocal, and that's quite similar to me. Like, as soon as you see what happens, you just feel a fire in your belly to just have it stop and tell everybody. So you've kind of answered this as well, but what made you active instead of just going vegan?
Yeah, I wonder that a lot because it seems like most people who go vegan don't get active, which is kind of weird to me. I think a lot of people feel that just being vegan is enough,
Mhm.
and it's certainly better than nothing. I'm not going to disagree with that. But to me, it didn't feel like enough. And I think maybe part of the reason that I became active right away is because a huge part of why I went vegan was because I read Earthling Ed's ebook called 30 Non-Vegan Excuses and How to Respond to Them. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but it's actually a book for vegan activists. So maybe having that be kind of the first thing with veganism that I interacted with made me more likely to get active since I already knew the debunks and the arguments.
Mhm.
And then I think the biggest thing for me was watching Dominion and seeing just how terrible it was for the animals, and not only seeing it, but also feeling like I could actually make a difference. Because if I didn't know all this stuff, that means a lot of other people don't know all this stuff. So some people, when I tell them how bad it is, will change. Most people won't, but some will. So I felt that it was an area where I could have a greater degree of control than with some other atrocities in the world.
Yeah. Do you find in your experience when you speak to people that most of them don't actually know what's happening, or they have some base knowledge? Like, what's the kind of feel there? Is it mainly that they don't know what's going on?
Yeah, it's tough to say because I think a lot of people have this vague idea that what's happening to animals is really bad, but they don't know specifically what happens. And that's certainly how I felt before I was vegan. I thought, oh, factory farming's terrible. I would never want to support that. That's awful. But I didn't think I was buying factory farmed meat, which is so stupid because that's over 99% of the meat supply. But I was like, oh, I shop at Trader Joe's, so it's fine. It's ethical. And obviously that's stupid. So I think that a lot of people delude themselves into thinking that the meat they're buying isn't the same that has all that issues. But they're genuinely surprised by a lot of the things that happen in animal agriculture. Very few people know that day-old male chicks are ground up. A lot of people don't know that dairy cows have to be impregnated. So there are many standard practice things that the public is not aware of. The pigs being killed in gas chambers is a great example of that. So I think that people do know that something bad is happening, but they don't know specifically what those bad things are.
Yeah, it's like they haven't really made that connection. It's far away from them. So could you touch upon the sort of outreach that you've typically done in the past, so people, if they don't know you, can get a feel for what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done quite a few different types of outreach. When I first started, I had a sign that said free beer if you talk to me about
Oh yeah,
veganism, and I would
yeah.
just give people beer and we would chat about veganism and I would put that up. And then I moved into more indirect forms of outreach. So they wouldn't know that the conversation was going to be about veganism until we were about
Mm,
halfway through, which I actually feel is more effective, although it's a bit more scary to actually do.
yeah.
So one way you could do that is you just start asking people about power in society. Do you think people should abuse power? Is there a problem with abusing power? Should you have power over individuals who are weaker than you? And everyone agrees, like, no, you shouldn't abuse power. That's terrible. So then when you tie that idea to what we're doing to animals, it really connects people with how horrible the situation is because the animals are so helpless, and I find that's a great way to break through cognitive defenses. And then more recently, I've been touring on some universities with Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, which is a great organization. If anyone doesn't follow Faraz Harsini, definitely do it. And we kind of do the typical debate style, like, why aren't you vegan yet? Or give me your best argument against veganism. Can you love animals and eat them too? So those are kind of the debates that I've been having more recently.
You also did, you do Elwood's
Oh yeah,
organic dog meat outreach,
how
don't you? Can
how
you
could
talk about
how could
that?
I forget? How could I forget the Elwood's Organic Dog Meat? That's like by far the best thing that we do. So we set up this table, we have this flag that says free dog meat, we have these gross looking plastic things that look like really old meat. And then we say, hey, free dog meat, and people come up, and a lot of people, most people don't want to eat it. Some people do. And then we talk about morality. So yeah, that's, I think, probably my favorite, not only because it's the easiest to actually get people to come talk to you, but when they do talk to you, that you can build the connection that they have with animals more easily because they already feel it so deeply for
Hmm.
dogs.
What has been, is there any kind of memory that sticks out to you of the best interaction that you've ever had?
Like with dog meat
Or
or in general?
just generally in outreach?
Yeah.
Like, is there
Uh,
something you really think about?
yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a few. The dog meat example that comes to mind, this video went pretty viral on
I know the
Instagram,
one
so
you mean.
I wouldn't be surprised if some people saw it, but this guy comes over, he starts yelling at us. He's got a chihuahua in his arms. He's like, "You gonna eat my dog? What the F is wrong with you guys?" He started cussing us out. He's like, "Are you selling dogs or not?" And then I just kind of talk him down. I'm like, "Hey, like, I'm so glad that you're upset about this because that shows that you care about animals and you're against animal abuse. We're also against animal abuse. What about pigs and chickens and cows? Do you eat those animals? Have you ever thought about it?" And he says that he thinks about it every day, he feels bad about it, and he said he was going to go vegan. I don't know if he did, but that one was definitely very memorable, especially because it's rare that someone has enough humility to be able to go from really angry to like really open. That's pretty rare. Usually when people are angry, they're going to stay closed off to you. So I thought it was really cool how he changed once he realized that we weren't actually selling dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a book for
Mm.
activism tips, don't you, on like how to outreach and everything like that? Can you kind of talk about that, because it's a free resource, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I wrote it this year. It's about 35 pages. It's an ebook. It tells you how to start doing outreach, how to film outreach if you want to film it, what questions to ask people, how to start conversations, basic social skills, all this great stuff. It is free. If you want to get it, go to my Instagram profile, and it's the first post that's pinned. and you basically just type your email in and it'll send you both the book version and the audio version if you don't like to read, because I know some people don't. So you can grab it for free. The goal is to get as many people out there doing activism, and I wanted to lower the barrier as effectively as possible, so it represents everything I've learned about outreach in the last 3 years. So I definitely recommend it. And yeah, check it out. Even if you're not sure if you want to do outreach, but part of you kind of wants to, then give it a read and see how you feel afterward.
It's good that you have an audio version because I can't sit down and read. So
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah. So if someone still isn't going to read it or listen to it, when you were writing it, are there a couple of pointers that stick out to you that you would want every potential activist to know, if you've got a couple of them?
Yes. So I would say definitely focus on your social skills and making people comfortable. A lot of people
Yeah.
think that it doesn't matter how the other person feels because what matters is speaking up for animals. And I agree that we always want to be truthful and we don't want to sugarcoat anything and we don't want to let people get away with anything. We want to hold them accountable. But you can do all of that while being aware of how you're coming across and making sure that the other person is comfortable with you, because if they're not comfortable, then they're not going to be honest and you're not going to get anywhere with them. I see so many activists go up to people, just try to start debates, and you can tell that the activist is more interested in being right than actually, you know, really anything else. I don't know why they care so much about being right, but they do, and the other person can sense it, and no one wants to deal with someone like that. So just make sure that you are always nice to people. So treat them with kindness, even if they're mean to you, because people can write off the entire vegan movement if they have one negative interaction with a vegan. And that's unfortunate that we have to represent vegans
Yeah.
just as individuals, but it's also the truth. I mean, I hated vegetarians when I was growing up because I knew a couple vegetarians who I didn't like at all. And, it's a bummer, but that's just kind of like how humans are wired. So when you meet someone on the street, shake their hand, give them a smile, ask them a few questions about themselves, find out what they're passionate about. The whole time, make it clear that you're not judging them, you're not going to shame them, you're not going to let them get away with anything or sugarcoat the truth, but just treat people with kindness, and I think that you'll have a much better time. So I would definitely emphasize that.
Are there any books on like persuasion and these kind of techniques that you've read that have influenced you to be this specific way and conduct your activism in this manner?
Yeah, definitely. So there's kind of the classic book on persuasion. Most people have probably heard of it. It's called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And he talks about the different things that influence people. One of them is social proof. So that's why I think it's good to post these outreach videos, because people can see other people changing their minds about veganism. And that makes them more likely to change their mind. Another thing from Influence that I used is it's called the law of reciprocity. So basically, if you give someone something, they're going to feel like they owe you
Yeah.
one. So they will be a lot nicer. So that's what I did with the free beer. You can do free cookies or free cupcakes. Once you've given someone something, they're going to be nicer to you. So definitely lean into that. And in terms of communication, there's a lot. But I just started this book by Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit. It's called Super Communicators. It's really interesting so far. It's about how the human brain is wired for connection, but not everyone can connect with other people in a
Mm-hmm.
great way. So it's about how to be able to connect with people. And it's really interesting so far. So I think that trying to build the connection with the person first is important, because otherwise you're not going to be persuasive to them. I read this one book about animal advocacy coming from the perspective of someone who was treating men who abused their wives. And one of the biggest determinants of whether or not they would stop abusing their wives is if they liked the psychologist. So we want these people to like us, unfortunately. So yeah, just, that obviously hasn't been applied to animal activism. I don't know if it would necessarily apply to it, but that's another thing that I think about.
Yeah, that's quite difficult as well, because given like vegans are one of the most hated groups in society, like one of,
Yeah.
I think it was a
Yeah.
survey or something said that it's like we've got a world against us in order to even reach these people if we're going to try and use this method. So yeah, that's a good idea to give like a free beer or something like that. That would be a good way to implement. But you mentioned maybe not doing so much outreach at the moment for a little time because you're going to be focusing on Pro Animal Future. Do you want to kind of talk more about Pro Animal Future and what they're doing and why, if I'm actually correct here, you are kind of moving away from outreach for a second and, you know, focusing on other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So a huge part, I forgot to mention this when you were asking me about kind of research or resources that have changed the way I think about advocacy, but one of the big ones was a narrative study that Pax Fauna put out about a year, a little over a year ago. And basically what they found is when you're talking to people about animal rights, if you talk to them about veganism, they feel helpless and like they can't change anything, and it puts them into a consumer mindset, and that's actually where people are most resistant to the idea of animal rights. There was a survey done by Sentience Institute, and it found that 97% of people agreed with this statement: whether to be vegan or vegetarian or eat meat is a personal choice, and nobody has the right to tell me what they think that I should do. But in that same survey, 49% of people were in favor of banning factory farming, and 47% of people were in favor of banning slaughter. In the mind of the public, factory farms and slaughter are almost the same. They don't really understand the difference between the two, which is actually absolutely baffling to me. So, Pro Animal Future was started by Pax Fauna from the research that came out of it. And they thought, hey, here's an opportunity for us. Here's an opportunity to actually ban slaughter or ban factory farming. Since we already have this public support, let's engage with people at the level of citizens as opposed to consumers, where they feel like they can actually make a difference. And when we talk to people about veganism, you know, we understand that it's not that big of a life change. Like going vegan is actually really easy. But to the other person, it doesn't seem easy. It seems really hard. It seems like we're asking them to do a lot. So by shifting from asking them to go vegan and instead asking them to vote for certain policies, that's so much easier for them, right? So we can take on the brunt of the work. We can get out there. We can talk to people about these policies. We can get these laws on ballots. We're not relying on meat eaters to change. We're focusing on what we can do as advocates. And I think that's great because I care a lot more about what I can do than what other people can do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you using the power of, because you were talking, you've been talking before about how the kind of top down approach, like government isn't, we can't really wait around for that. But if you can use government institutions like voting to actually influence what's going to happen in an area, then it's bringing the power back to the people. And it's just so,
Yeah.
it's so weird that people they go into this consumer mindset that you're talking about. If you could maybe expand on that in a moment and what that even means. But yeah, they go into this consumer mindset when veganism is brought up, but they want to ban the very thing that they're trying to defend.
They what?
They're trying to they're happy to ban
Oh yeah.
the very thing
Yeah,
that they're
I
trying
know.
to
I know.
defend.
It's so weird. It doesn't actually make sense at all. It's one of those things that I think reveals how successful the meat industry has been at disconnecting the animals from the meat. I think these people actually think that like they're still gonna have meat if they ban slaughter. Like I think it's
Maybe they
crazy.
do.
I think they do. Like it's wild.
So what is this consumer mindset? It feels quite obvious in the title, but is this explored further? Like, what does it really mean and entail?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough. I don't know like the exact definition of it, but essentially it just means that as individuals, we don't have that much power. The power we have comes from whatever little
Ah,
consumption, whatever little difference that makes. And most people feel as if that's not really going to make a dent in animal agriculture, especially when, you know, 7.5 or however many billion people have no intention of stopping eating meat. People don't feel like that they are required to be ethical in this when so many other people aren't. So it's just kind of this feeling of futility and like they can't make a difference. Whereas if they see society changing, they're a lot happier to join the societal change than to kind of be the one going against the grain of society. So if we can help them do that, then that would be a win.
Yeah. Well, what's your, I'm interested in what your content's going to look like when you're implementing pro animal future. Like, do you have plans for videos and how you're going to go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably, it sounds like you watched my Alex O'Connor video,
Yeah,
which
I did.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it would be kind of more stuff like that. I'm still going to do outreach videos. I'm still going to put up debate videos. I still have a lot of footage from the tour for that. And I like doing outreach. So I probably will do it again, even if I don't necessarily think it's the most effective thing in terms of societal change. I think that it still has merit. And I enjoy doing it, and I know people like watching it. So I
Yeah.
don't intend to ever completely
Okay.
stop doing outreach.
Good. Good.
But but I do want to make more videos about maybe animal rights as separate from veganism, because veganism is so much about consumption and like your individual change, and I would like it to become a bit more political and
Yeah.
more about changing the world for animals at a societal level, I guess. So making some videos about that as
Because
well.
it is inherently political anyway. You can't really escape politics, it
Yeah.
seems, in anything that you do. And you, in that same video, you kind of touched upon historical accounts of similar, like of social justice movements doing similar things. Can you expand upon like an idea or a social justice movement that did it a certain way, and why you'd want to copy that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one great example of this would be the abolition movement in the US. So back then, the slaves were making, pretty much anything that involved cotton. So most of the clothes that people bought in the US were made with slave labor. And one person started saying, hey, let's just advocate for everyone to stop buying slave-made goods. And then when they do that, the institution of slavery will die because there won't be demand, kind of like what we're trying to do with animal agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that that just wasn't really effective at all. It did work in one case in the UK where people stopped buying sugar for a few months to protest the slave
Oh,
trade.
okay.
But it didn't work in the US. Unfortunately, I don't know. Maybe Americans are just a lot more like personal choice and freedom. I kind of have the sense that they are. So they abandoned that and focused more on like getting slaves out of there so it could be like open rescue type stuff, changing the laws surrounding slavery. I don't actually know how the abolitionists were eventually successful. I think there were like a lot of different things that went into it. And obviously, it culminated in a civil war, which we'd like to avoid with animal agriculture. I would prefer if we didn't have to go to war over this. So, but there are still some parallels there, which I thought were interesting.
Okay, yeah. So going back to outreach, say if you're sat for like how long do you sit for in a given sitting for outreach?
Like with one person, you mean? Like one
So
conversation?
say you've got a day where you're like, right, I'm going to go out and do some outreach today. Like, how long would you spend kind of sitting at? You have like a booth, don't you? Like a table.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm out at universities, we'll typically sit out there from 10 a.m. to maybe 5 p.m. and then we'll do a cube after that
Oh my
sometimes.
goodness,
So
you
we're
are
out
you
we're
are.
out there for quite a while. But when I was just on my own in New Orleans, I'd probably stay out for, I don't know, maybe 4 hours,
Mhm.
maybe less sometimes if I got like a solid video, then I could wrap up.
Yeah,
But
how many people would you say on average kind of sit down to have that conversation with you in that kind of 4 hour window?
whew, I mean, it depends on what you're doing. If you're giving out free beer, you're gonna have a lot of conversations. If you
Yeah.
just have a sign about veganism, you're probably not gonna get that many conversations. If you're doing dog meat, you're gonna have plenty. So it really depends on what you're doing. Obviously, the more the better, but there's a caveat. You don't want to waste time with people who are just there to argue. So knowing when to shut those down is also a really important skill.
That's why it's quite, you want to be quite careful on, like, because I hold up a sign, for vegan FTA, that veganism is a moral obligation, prove me wrong, and it can cause some kind of issues because people like moral obligation, they start talking about religion and things
Yeah.
like that. So it's quite, what would be would you say like a really good sign to put out there to get people talking about veganism itself, not like provocative like Elwood's organic dog meat or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you brought up that specific sign. We had a similar experience when we were kind of promoting Christspiracy, the documentary,
Yeah.
at this one university, and we had a sign that said, "What would Jesus think about factory farming?" And what we found is that kind of pre-selected for the worst conversations, because then the people who were Christian, who really cared about religion, came over, and they're very hard to persuade on this topic. So, yeah, you definitely want to think about what types of people your sign is attracting.
Mhm.
My favorite sign, and this will get people talking, not necessarily about veganism. I actually stole this from Justin of Debug Your Brain,
Yeah.
and it just says, "Help me grow my YouTube channel, answer thought-provoking questions." And I really like thought-provoking because the kind of people who want their thoughts to be provoked, you're generally going to have good conversations with. So if you could
True.
somehow work thought-provoking or open-minded, or just kind of the qualities you want in the people you're talking to into your sign, then it'll attract them. As far as putting vegan on the sign, I have not had much success with that in the past because I find that it does immediately trigger people, especially when you combine it with moral. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
like
something to move away from.
definitely. You're trying to kind of test it, figure out what the best signs are, because that one, it has people come past and they're like, hey, I support you because it has the word vegan on it, like more than in my outreach, more so now than ever. I've seen people be like, well done, I support you. So it
It's
seems to
because you
be
live in the
more.
UK,
Yeah.
because more people are vegan there. That's
People
awesome.
are actually vegan here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's fantastic.
nice.
But it seems that the population is growing and there's more people who are on the side of it, but definitely need to change that sign and think more about maybe a thought-provoking question that you've stolen from it to debug your brain would be a really good one.
Yeah.
um what would you say, because we can't try and convince people to go vegan, but if you were to convince anyone in 30 seconds, you had 30 seconds to convince someone to be active for the animals, what would you say to them?
Wow. What would I say to them? So this is tough because, like, when you're trying to persuade someone, it helps if you know a little bit about them and what they
Yeah.
value. So I guess I'll just kind of be broad with this. If you're watching this right now, you probably care about animals and you probably care about animal liberation. And the unfortunate truth is that whether or not animals are gonna stop being tortured by the billions is it completely dependent on the group of people who care about this, which is very small, and you are part of it. So actually, Earthling Ed made this argument to a group of vegans that I thought was really good. He basically said, like, there's a blind man and he's walking into a hole, and if you don't stop him, he's going to fall into that hole and die. And you can see him, but he can't see. That means it's your responsibility to tell him about the hole so he doesn't fall in and die. So basically, the future of humanity is that hole, and if we keep doing this insane stuff to animals, we are going to go extinct. We're going to ruin the planet. We're going to create a pandemic. Basically, we're not going to have life as we know it if we keep going in this direction. So we are like the person who can see, and the blind person is like all the meat eaters, right? So we need to make them aware of the dangers of animal farming, and it's the most important thing that we can do with our lives. And the good news is that it doesn't have to be hard. There's so many easy ways to do activism. Follow Animal Activism Mentorship on Instagram. You can be put with a mentor, or you can just go comment on some of their posts and help out. The stakes are they're like high and low at the same time, right? Because the stakes are so high, because if we don't solve this problem, we're all going to die. But also the stakes of the day-to-day actions are low. If you try activism and it doesn't work out, then, at least you learned something, right? So there is no failure when it comes to activism. Just try your best. And yeah, the animals need you.
Absolutely, that sounds brilliant. So for people watching, if you do have a question for Natalie, there is a comment bubble with a question mark in it. If you want to leave that, we'll see if there's any towards the end. But this one's a fun one. What is your least favorite argument against veganism and
Oh
why?
my God. Oh, I get so many arguments against veganism. I think my least favorite one, it comes from the pedophile Ted Nugent, who I just learned is a pedophile. He had a song about 13-year-olds called Jailbait, which is absolutely
Oh my
disgusting.
God.
So, background for anyone who doesn't know, he goes on Joe Rogan and basically says that vegans kill way more animals than meat eaters. This is called crop deaths. I actually have a coworker who's been vegan for 7 years and had never heard the crop deaths argument, and I was just so jealous of her because I wish I could go back in
What?
time and never hear it. So yeah, crop deaths is definitely my least favorite because it's so easy to say, but takes a long time to debunk. And
Yes.
then they don't believe you anyway. So it's like totally pointless. And I get it all the time. So yeah, that's by far my least favorite argument. Is that most people's
I
answer?
It's mine. It's like, it's
Okay.
just, there's so much to it, and you're like, wow, where do I actually begin?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Let's see that. I think there is a question. I'll have a look. Oh, it's just do you read the comments? So yeah, we're reading the comments, but they're going quite quickly. So if you do have a question for Natalie, just quickly leave it in there, and then we'll see it. I've got another 30-second question. If you had 30 seconds to convince someone to go vegan,
Ooh.
what would you say?
So one thing I've learned in activism is that it's better to ask questions than to just say things. So once again, I would want to know more about the individual. I would probably say maybe I'd just share a little story I have. Um, so I have a dog, and when we go to the vet, he gets really scared. He shakes, he quivers, he hates it. And every time I would think about buying animal products, I would just think like, my dog gets so upset going at the vet. Do I really want to pay for animals to feel like that and to feel afraid and to smell the blood in front of them and to watch their friends die in front of them? Obviously, I don't want to pay for that. So I would try to connect them with an animal that they love and then make the case that the animals in slaughterhouses are just like that animal. I found that to be pretty effective.
That's why probably the Elle organic dog meat stuff
Yes,
works so well, because
exactly.
it's just, yeah, it
It's true.
I
It's
just,
true. I mean, these animals are just the same, you know?
Molly is a legend.
Oh, such a legend, dude.
um Someone asked, how do we convince people about health in veganism? So health obviously comes up in your outreach. So what do you usually do when that comes up?
Sure. So health is one of those things that if people don't believe you that veganism is healthy, they're not going to change their mind on veganism. But sometimes they're arguing about health just to distract you. So what I would say is the American Dietetic Association and many other groups of nutritionists have all said that vegan diets are healthy for all stages of life, including pregnancy and infancy. And you could even talk about game changers or say there are bodybuilders who are vegan, there are Olympic athletes who are vegan. But I think the real trick is to ask them, if you found out that veganism was healthy, would you go vegan? And they're usually going to say no because they don't actually have any interest in going vegan. They don't actually care about the health. They're just trying to distract you. So just make sure to ask that question to figure out if they are actually genuine. If they say yes, then that's great. Then you give them resources about health, give them a couple documentaries, websites, nutritionfacts.org, whatever. And if they're genuine about it, then they'll look into it, see that veganism is healthy, and go vegan.
Absolutely. Someone
Oh,
asked,
but one
is,
thing
oh
before,
yeah,
actually, before we wrap up on that, never bring up health because
no.
that's one of the areas that we found really triggers these personal choice defenses. So don't ever bring it up unless someone else brings it up.
I guess it, yeah, it's going to trigger a response because it's about someone's like
Yeah.
autonomy, and then that gets really difficult. Someone asked, animal activism mentorship, was that the name that you mentioned for the help?
Yeah, Animal Activism Mentorship, or AAM for short. And they're great. It's totally free. You can sign up and they will pair you with a mentor who is more experienced. I'm a mentor. I've got a couple mentees right now, and it's just so wonderful to watch them go from not really knowing what to do in terms of activism to, sometimes organizing their own protest or starting social media and all this stuff. So we've definitely had a lot of success stories come out of AAM. And it also connects you with other activists. You can find them in your area, and just having that base of friends who are not only vegan but active is a great way to make yourself do more activism. So I can't recommend it highly enough.
That kind of touches upon what I was going to ask, because obviously people are quite scared to go active.
Mm-hmm.
That a brilliant thing would be to get a mentor, because there's loads of different organizations that actually like do that, because you can feel like when I first got into animal rights activism, I felt very alone and I didn't know what to do, and I was trying to learn so much, because there's so much that people want to say that you've got to be ready for, that you basically need a mentorship just to feel like you're not overwhelmed by everything. So that is a brilliant resource. Let's see what other people have said. What is the most important change in politics for a country like Mexico with a poor population? So what would you say about poor populations and when it comes to veganism?
I am not sure. I don't want to pretend like I know very much about Mexico or much at policy levels. I think that when it comes to poor, like anything about people who have less money, I think increasing the accessibility of veganism is important. Now, it is pretty accessible in the US. I think it's accessible in Mexico. I'm pretty sure they eat a lot of beans and rice.
Mm-hmm.
But some of our future ballot initiatives with Pro Animal Future will look like making veganism more accessible to people in a more cost-effective way. So I would say look up, I don't know if Mexico does ballot initiatives, see what kind of laws you can get on there, see if you can change the subsidies. I would assume that the government subsidizes animal farming pretty heavily, just like they do in most countries. So seeing if there's any room to change that and to make them subsidize plant farming, I think would be a great route to go for that. But if you personally are worried about going vegan and worrying that it's going to be too expensive, I assure you it's not. The cheapest foods at the grocery store are naturally vegan.
Mm-hmm. With Pro Animal Future, do you have some sort of like, because obviously I'm not in the US, I don't really understand US politics. Have you got some sort of 5-year or 4-year plan where
Yeah,
you expect a certain thing to happen that you could touch upon?
sure. So yeah, we have actually a 10-year plan, and so right now we are in the first stage, which is our pilot campaign, which is just in Denver. I mentioned earlier, for anyone who wasn't here, that we're trying to ban the sale of fur and to ban slaughter in Denver. So once we win that, hopefully we win that, we are going to expand to other cities. Right now, the cities on the docket look like Columbus, Ohio, Portland, Oregon, maybe St. Louis, Missouri. They have to be cities where ballot initiatives are allowed, which is about half of US states allow those, and also cities where there's like a good animal rights activism community, because it does take a lot of work for these ballot initiatives. So I'm not sure about other countries. I know some countries do have ballot initiatives, but I don't know.
What, so
We're
what
going to be
is
in the US.
what is a
Oh,
ballot
but
initiative?
okay.
Just because.
Yeah. So it's basically, it's so cool. It's like you can literally create a law, and then you get a bunch of signatures to put that law on the ballot, and then people can vote directly yes or no for that law. So when we talk about banning slaughter, we have this law. It's going to shut down this industrial slaughterhouse, and no new slaughterhouses will be allowed to be built in Denver. So people see that on the ballot, they can vote yes or no. If we get over 50% yes, then we will win, and the slaughterhouse will be forced to close, and no new slaughterhouses can be
Wow.
built. So yeah, you can just create laws. And I mean, obviously there's like legislative stuff that goes into it that I'm not as familiar with that process, but it's great because what we found with animal rights laws in the past is that the meat and dairy lobby is so powerful, and the politicians, they just give money to the politicians, so the politicians don't want to do anything against them. So this is bypassing all of that and just going straight to voters. But
Yeah,
I
and
didn't
as you said
finish. Well, I
hmm?
was going to say I forgot to actually finish the 10-year
Yes.
plan, because in 10 years we want to ban factory farming at the state level. So there are ballot initiatives at the local level and also at the state level, and we want to do 10 states. So it's going to be a lot of work.
Wow. And then you have
Yeah.
all the vegans just move there.
Yeah, if you want a place to stay, we'll get you covered.
That is fantastic. Well, and Natalie, I know this is an awkward thing to do, but we're coming to a close. I just want to have a few moments just to finally say for the people who are joining who you are and why people should follow what you're doing, especially for the next 10 years.
All right, what's up, everyone? I'm Natalie Fulton. I'm an animal advocate based in New Orleans, Louisiana. I've been doing street outreach for about 3 years, and I'm really passionate about animal rights and veganism. And I recently started doing more legislative stuff. So we're working on ballot initiatives to ban slaughter and the sale of fur in Denver, and that's going to be expanded. So definitely follow me if you're interested in anything about animal rights, or if you like fun juggling videos and want me to make fun of anything. I love doing that. So also you can find me on YouTube at Natalie Fulton.
Yeah, that's worth noting. Before, Natalie was called the juggling vegan, but there wasn't
Yes.
enough juggling happening.
Not enough juggling, but
I think I
I guess
criticized
I'm
you for
bringing
that.
it back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please, with
yeah.
fire.
Yeah, I need some fire sticks.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I hope everyone in the chat has enjoyed this. This will be up on YouTube as well. Yes, thank you to anyone who's watched. And thank you again, Natalie, for being here.
Thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for everything you do with Vegan FTA. Y'all are amazing, and I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.